Before the internet, the predominant way to get files from one computer to another was to manually save them to some sort of storage device and take them to the other computer. This was known as the sneakernet. And it wasn't until Vint Cerf and Bob Kahn developed a file transfer communications protocol that computers were able to directly communicate with each other. Modems then allowed these digital communications to be converted to analog and transferred through existing phone wires, very similar to how early telegraph machines worked. Eventually, they evolved into the standardized and digitized Ethernet cables that we know today. But in the age of wireless communication, these retro pieces of computing history are becoming more and more obsolete. Let's give them the send-off they deserve by hacking some new life into them. Here's how a standard Ethernet cable works. In each cable there are 8 wires, unlike the phone cable which only has 6. This is the standard way in which Ethernet wires are arranged, but as long as the color arrangement on one end matches the color arrangement on the other end, you should be fine. These wires are then aligned and fitted into a connector called a registered Jack 45 connector. When referring to Ethernet cables, you'll sometimes hear terms tossed around like Cat5, Cat5e, or Cat6. These terms refer to how insulated the wires are from interference and how fast they can transmit data. So, whenever an Ethernet cable is connected to a computer, that computer assigns each of these wires a transmit or receive protocol. These remaining wires aren't used unless you have a gigabit connection. Now, this type of connection is standard on all computers, so if you took a single Ethernet cable and plugged one end into one computer and the other end into a different computer, they would both be able to send data, but neither one could receive it. But what if on one end of the cable you swap the transmitting and receiving wires? This would allow one computer to send data while the other one would be able to receive it. This type of cable is known as a crossover cable, and it's often used in IT environments whenever you're wanting to communicate with another computer without using a router, a switch, or the internet. Okay, hack number 2. As I mentioned before, in networks other than gigabit networks, only 2 pairs of wires are being used per Ethernet cable. So what can we do with these extra wires? Well, you could run another Ethernet connection through them. To do this, first connect the Ethernet transfer and receive wires to another cable as normal, but separate out these extra wires. Then connect those wires to a new Ethernet cable's transfer and receive wires. Now, in business use, this will allow you to connect to multiple networks at the same time without having to install 2 network cards in your computer. As for home use, most people normally don't have multiple networks, but crossing over these cables like we did earlier can make a pretty sweet looking straight/crossover combo cable. One thing to keep in mind when using the excess wires of a network cable is that the more data you have flowing through a cable, the more opportunities for interference. This can cause a slower or more unreliable internet connection. Alright, now that you know that most Ethernet cables only use half of their wires, you can use the remaining 4 wires for almost any other purpose and still have a functioning Ethernet cable. One perfect example is USB, because USB cables use exactly 4 wires. To hook this up, align each color on the Ethernet cable to match a corresponding color on the USB cable. And make sure that you repeat this exact same alignment with the cable on the opposite end. You might be thinking that this looks stupid and who would use it, but think about it like this. If you have an Ethernet connection running through the walls of your house, you've now created a USB extension cable that can run through walls. Aside from data, can these wires also transmit power? Well, yes, but obviously you have to be very careful with it. Please do not do this hack unless you're very familiar with voltages and the dangers that they can cause. This type of setup is known as Power over Ethernet, or PoE. Its use case is to run power to routers and switches that aren't close to any other power outlets. The setup principle is the same as the USB hack. You can take your power cable and cut it in half and connect the plus wire to one of the extra twisted pairs in the Ethernet cable and connect the minus wire to the other pair. Repeat this exact same combination to the opposite end of the cable. Then wherever you need to run the cable to, you don't have to worry about whether an outlet is there or not. Hopefully these hacks make you see the standard old network cable in a new light. Alright, if you missed last week's video, you can click here to watch it. And if you liked my videos, please show your support by subscribing. And if you want to keep updated, check out my Google+, Facebook, or Twitter pages. And until next time, hack to learn. Don't learn to hack.